We're going to start our learning by talking about how feedback moves the learning forward. Now, I have a very, very clear image of what feedback is, and that is the paper that I got back from my teacher in middle school or in high school, and there are comments written all over it with a red pen. And yes, it was a red pen. Now, I know that most teachers don't use red pens anymore, but I do know that many teachers put lots and lots of comments on paper, and we think of that as feedback. I want to sort of tweak our thought, tweak what we think about as feedback, because a lot of times that feedback that we're providing for a student is after the fact. The paper is finished, so now I fill it full of feedback, but the learning is done. So how does that feedback actually impact what is going on with the student? This first kind of step in this feedback and data module is to think about feedback as something that continuously moves the learning forward, and something that helps students know what comes next. I want to draw your attention to this illustration that I have right here. And this illustration is meant to kind of demonstrate what learning could look like for students. So we have a learning target. All students start at the very same learning target. That would be a standard, the learning target. And we all end at some sort of a demonstration of learning. But if you look at this illustration, you see that there are several different colors of paths. We have a gray one, we have a blue one, a red one, and a pinkish purple one. Each of those, the gray path is kind of the way that the teacher expected the learning to go, from the learning target to the demonstration of learning. But all the other paths wind and cross and go round and round. Those are what actually happens through the learning process with students. Now you'll notice that I added a couple other things here, and one of them is a picture of two people talking. That is to represent some sort of feedback. Now, I use the teacher-student feedback, but it could be student to student. It could be students to self. So any kind of feedback is sort of represented by that two people talking. Then there's also an icon that is like a computer screen with a magnifying glass, and that's any time that we're gathering data. You'll notice that generally that feedback is close to a data. And what's happening is, in this model, to illustrate our kind of the perfect idea, is that each time that there is some sort of a feedback conversation, some sort of feedback in documentation, there's also some data that comes from that. And then the path changes, because based on what we know a student knows, we change the path for that student. Now, I would like to suggest that that's a partnership. It's not just the teacher changing the path for the student, but the student begins to own the learning more and more, and they are part of this changing path. So what are the things we need to really think about when we're thinking about moving our feedback that moves the learning forward? Well, we need to first of all consider what feedback is all about. Feedback needs to be timely. It needs to be in the moment. It needs to be current, and it needs to be ongoing. I know I was in high school a very long time ago, but I remember how it felt when I had done a task. This happens in college, this happens all the time. I'd done a task, and there's a period of time before that feedback comes from that task. And by the time I got the feedback on this assignment, we'd actually moved on in the classroom. That is not feedback that helps my learning move forward. That's feedback that told me how I did on this thing long ago. It doesn't mean now. So feedback really needs to be timely and current, and it needs to be ongoing. In our synchronous and asynchronous learning environment that we have in this continuous learning, we can do that. We can provide feedback in a variety of different ways. We can make sure that we have check-ins with students. It can be small group, it can be large group. We can make sure that the learning is chunked, so there's some learning, and then we're getting feedback to see what they know and what they don't know. Feedback also needs to be goal-oriented. I need to continuously, as a teacher, explain where to go next. Where do you need to head to? What is it that you need to work on to get closer to that learning target? It also needs to focus very specifically on the task with descriptive words that connect back to that learning target. Good job tells a student absolutely nothing. What we need to tell them is, you use descriptive words in this sentence that explain to me how you're feeling about this content. which is going back to that learning target. We also need to honor the work of the student. So students that are struggling, sometimes they can feel like there are so many different things they need to work on that can't pick and choose. So helping them to focus in on what are the most important things, helping them prioritize and honor all the work they've done to get to this place. It also, and one of the things you're going to hear from Hattie in his interview, is the importance of creating a place and space to discuss errors and misconceptions. When I think about classrooms that I've been a part of, rarely do I hear teachers spending time talking about what students don't understand. We may ask for questions and then we move on. It really doesn't give space for students to explain, here's what I thought you were saying, but that's not making sense to me. So how do we create a classroom culture that allows that kind of space for students to actually discuss what they understand, what they don't understand, and to really focus in on those errors? What is what is happening that is incorrect, and what are we missing to move that incorrect answer to be a correct answer? You're going to have an opportunity now to listen to Dr. John Hattie. This is the clip that you're going to hear is from a interview done with Dr. John Hattie and Mindy Carney and Gina Rogers, two of our digital learning team members. They interviewed him for the EdTech Takeout. Now, the whole interview is wonderful, and I would highly recommend listening to the entire interview. But the part that's really pertinent to feedback is from about 9 minutes and 36 seconds to almost 18 minutes. And it's in that section, he really talks about the different types of feedback and what he sees as the most important part. And that's that room for misconception. So listen in on that. I think it will answer any questions that you have. And what exactly was she talking about with this room for this misconception and errors as part of learning? After you're finished listening to this interview, I would ask you to think about these reflection questions. Give yourself some time to really consider your own feedback practices and what could this new learning, how could this impact the way you've been using feedback in your own classroom? Good luck, and I'll see you again after this assignment.